The town I grew up in was small. So small that secrets had a way of slipping through cracks, and yet somehow everyone knew everyone's business. Our street was quiet, with old houses leaning in on each other like they were sharing stories of the past. Tall, ancient trees lined the road, their branches creaking in the wind as if they, too, held memories of the people who had lived and loved there. My family lived in a modest house, with a white picket fence that seemed to smile through the years, while our neighbor's home stood like an imposing fortress. Mr. Collins' house was bigger, newer, and too perfect for its surroundings. It was a kind of place that made you feel like you didn't belong just by standing too close. Mr. Collins, the owner of the house, was a wealthy, reclusive man. He was a man of few words, barely ever engaging with anyone, but he had one obsession that caught everyone's eye: his car. A sleek, black sports car that looked like it had been plucked from the glossy pages of a magazine. Every Saturday, without fail, he would be outside, polishing it, waxing it, inspecting it as if the car were a living, breathing thing. He treated it like a treasure, and it made me wonder why anyone could care so much about a piece of metal, rubber, and glass. His wife, Mrs. Collins, couldn't have been more different. She was warm, kind, and always had a smile to spare. She would wave at me from across the street, and sometimes she'd stop to chat, asking about school or sharing cookies she had just baked. Their daughter, Stacy, was a sweet, carefree little girl. Her giggles could often be heard echoing from the yard as she played with her toys, oblivious to the strange atmosphere that seemed to hang around her father. But one day, everything changed. It was a quiet morning when the police came knocking on our door. They asked if we had seen Mrs. Collins or Stacy. They had vanished, disappeared into thin air. Mr. Collins claimed that his wife had left him, taking their daughter with her. There were no signs of a struggle, no note, no trace of where they had gone. My parents, like everyone else, were shocked, but we didn't have any information to give. Weeks passed, then months, and still no one had seen or heard from them. Rumors started to spread. Some said Mrs. Collins had run off with another man. Others whispered about something darker, something sinister that no one wanted to acknowledge. I tried to ignore it, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Every time I saw Mr. Collins polishing his car in the driveway, a chill would run down my spine. There was something off about it, something that felt wrong, like he was trying to distract himself from something terrible. Months later, something unusual happened. My dad was in the garage, tinkering with his truck, when he noticed something odd in Mr. Collins' garage. The door was cracked open, and inside, barely visible, was Mrs. Collins' white Jeep. The car was covered in a thick layer of dust, as though it hadn't been touched in months. My dad called us over, and we all stood there in disbelief. If Mrs. Collins had left him, why would her car still be here, collecting dust? A few days later, the Jeep was gone. Mr. Collins had sold it, or at least that's what we assumed. But his behavior had grown even more strange. He stopped spending as much time outside. When he did, he looked nervous, like he was constantly glancing over his shoulder. The once immaculate yard now appeared unkempt, and his car, which had once gleamed with almost unnatural shine, now sat in the driveway, dusty and neglected. Then one night, the thing that still haunts me to this day happened. My family and I were sitting down for dinner when a loud crash echoed through the night. It sounded like something heavy had fallen, and the silence that followed was even more unnerving. My dad immediately stood up, grabbed a flashlight, and told us to stay inside as he wanted to check it out. From the window, I watched as he crossed our yard, walking toward Mr. Collins' house. It took several minutes before Mr. Collins finally answered the door. He looked pale, sickly, as though he hadn't slept in days. When my dad asked if everything was okay, Mr. Collins simply nodded and muttered that he had dropped something. But there was something in his eyes, something that told my dad that the story didn't add up. He came back inside, looking shaken. He had seen something inside the house that disturbed him deeply. Through the crack in the door, he had noticed a pot of some kind of liquid simmering on the stove, and beside it, a gun was lying on the kitchen counter. The scene was unsettling. It didn't make sense. The whispers around town grew louder after that night. People began to speculate that Mr. Collins had something to do with the disappearance of his wife and daughter, but there was no concrete evidence. just the uncomfortable feeling that something horrible had happened in that house. My own nightmares began to change. I would wake up in a cold sweat, images of the gun and the simmering pot flashing in my mind. The thought that something so dark could exist so close to home was terrifying. Years passed, and I left the town. I moved away, hoping to leave the memories behind. But now and then, I still think about Mrs. Collins and Stacy. What happened to them? Were they ever found? Or did they slip into some dark corner of the world, far from the man who spent so much of his time polishing his car? And then there's a story I can't shake from my mind. It was late, past midnight, and I had just received an order that sent me to a part of the city I didn't recognize. The streets felt wrong, like they were shifting beneath me, twisting and turning in impossible ways. The GPS kept recalculating, sending me in circles. The lights on the street were few and far between, casting long, eerie shadows. Every turn felt like it led me deeper into a maze. My heart raced as a sense of unease built, my palms sweaty against the steering wheel. Finally, the GPS said I had arrived. The house stood at the end of a narrow street, a tall, decaying building with peeling paint and broken windows. The lawn was overgrown, the grass reaching up to my knees. It looked abandoned, as if no one had lived there for years. I hesitated, hand hovering over the gear shift, wondering if I should just leave. But the order was still waiting to be delivered. I stepped out of the car, and the air was heavy with the scent of mildew and something else I couldn't place. I walked toward the door, my steps echoing in the silence. The place felt alive in a way that sent shivers crawling up my spine. The door creaked open before I could knock, and an old man stood in the doorway, his eyes dark and hollow. He didn't say a word, just handed me the money and closed the door without another glance. I turned around and rushed back to my car, the unease gnawing at me. But as I got into the car, something caught my eye. The shadows in the house seemed to move, shifting like they were alive, watching me. I don't know what I saw that night. Maybe it was my imagination running wild, or maybe it was something far darker. But I never went back to that neighborhood, and I never took another order to that part of town. There are some things you just can't unsee, some places you can't forget, and sometimes the chill of the air is a warning that some secrets are better left untouched. I had been delivering food for a few months now, getting to know the city's nooks and crannies. But this night was different. It was late, probably past midnight, and I had just received an order that sent me to a part of town I didn't recognize. The streets twisted and turned, like they were designed confused, leading me deeper into a place that felt unfamiliar. The GPS kept recalculating, as if the roads were changing beneath my tires. The further I drove, the more the unease crept up my spine. The streetlights were sparse, casting long, eerie shadows that seemed to stretch forever. Each corner I turned felt like I was being pulled further into a maze, deeper into something wrong. My hands tightened on the wheel, my heart thumping louder with every passing second. But I knew the job had to be done. Finally, the GPS signaled I had arrived. I slowed, pulling up to a house at the end of a long, empty street. The place stood like a decaying monument, its paint peeling away like layers of forgotten time. Broken windows stared back at me, and the lawn had long since been overtaken by wild grass. The house seemed abandoned, yet there was something about it. The air around me felt heavy, oppressive. A thick fog of dread seemed to settle in my chest. I hesitated for a moment, my eyes darting around the street. There was no sign of life, no movement, no sound. I grabbed a bag of food and stepped out of the car, my shoes crunching on the gravel as I walked toward the porch. The night was suffocatingly still. The closer I got, the more I felt like I was being watched. My skin prickled, a chill running down my spine. My breath quickened, and the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. When I reached the porch, I noticed the front door was slightly ajar. It creaked open with the faintest push, revealing a dark hallway that seemed to stretch infinitely into the unknown. The blackness swallowed everything inside, and I could barely make out the faint outline of what might be the kitchen or living room. "Hello," I called out, my voice trembling. The silence swallowed my words, and the only sound was the echo of my own voice bouncing back at me. The cold, empty hall mocked me. Deep down, every instinct screamed at me to turn around, to drop the food and run back to the car. But something held me there. I had to go inside. Then I heard it, a faint rustling sound, like dry leaves being dragged across the ground. It sent a wave of panic through me. I turned quickly, my eyes searching the street, desperate for any sign of movement. And that's when I saw them. Figures emerged from the shadows, stepping from between the houses, creeping out from around corners. They glided toward me, their movements unnaturally smooth, almost like they were floating above the ground. My heart pounded in my chest, each beat deafening in my ears. One of them stepped into the dim light of the porch, and I froze. It was a person, or at least, it looked like one, but their face was hidden, covered by a blank white mask. The mask had no features, no eyes, no mouth, just a smooth, cold porcelain surface that seemed to reflect nothing. More figures emerged behind them, all wearing the same disturbing, expressionless masks. They surrounded me, inching closer, closing the space between us with every second. I tried to back away, but the porch railing stopped me. I was trapped. My breath came in short, sharp gasps as panic set in. My mind raced, looking for a way out, but there was no escape. One of the masked figures reached out. I flinched, dropping the food bag to ground. The coldness of their hand sent a shock through my body, like ice. They grabbed me with a grip that felt unnaturally strong, pulling me toward the door. I struggled, trying to break free, but their hold tightened with every movement. They didn't say a word. No sound, no explanation, just silence. The door slammed shut behind us, plunging me into complete darkness. I couldn't see a thing. The air was thick, stifling, and I could hear their footsteps all around me, soft, purposeful, like they were circling. Their cold hands searched through my pockets, taking my wallet, my phone, my keys. My chest tightened. I wanted to scream, to fight back, but the sound got caught in my throat, like the darkness had swallowed my voice. I could feel them moving around me, their presence suffocating, and for a moment, I thought I might lose my mind. What were they doing? Why didn't they speak? My thoughts were spinning out of control, but all I could feel was the crushing terror that held me captive. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, they let go of me. I collapsed to the floor, trembling uncontrollably. The footsteps grew fainter, the creak of the door opening and closing again, and then silence. I was left alone in the pitch-black house, abandoned in the darkness. Time seemed to stretch on forever as I lay there, too terrified to move. My mind replayed everything that had just happened, trying to make sense of it, but the more I thought about it, the less it made sense. Eventually, I forced myself to stand, my legs shaking beneath me. I stumbled to the door, pushed it open, and stumbled into the cold night. The street was empty. No sign of the masked figures. No sign of anyone at all. My car sat there, untouched, like nothing had happened. But everything had changed. I had been robbed, not just of my belongings, but of my sense of safety, of trust. The fear clawed at me as I drove away, the streets twisting in impossible directions, leading me in circles as if I couldn't escape. When I finally reached the main road, I didn't look back, but I knew that no matter how far I drove, the fear would always be there, lurking in the corners of my mind, waiting to pull me back into that house of horrors. I would never truly escape. Before we dive into the next chilling tale, if you're new here, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell icon for more spine-tingling stories. Share these with your friends and family. And remember, the darkness never lets go once it has you in its grip. The man's unsettling look made my heart skip a beat. I could feel the way of his stare, and then in the dead silence, he said something that sent a chill racing down my spine. "I'll pay you to let me in, just for an hour. I need to be alone with the bodies." The words hung in the air, thick and heavy, like a bad smell that lingered long after the source was gone. A wave of nausea washed over me. I exchanged a quick glance with the other orderly, our faces mirroring the disbelief and unease that flooded my chest. What kind of person asked to be alone with the dead at this hour? The man didn't seem to notice our discomfort. His eyes were fixed on us, almost desperate, as if he was waiting for us to say yes. The tension in the room was suffocating. I felt trapped, my mind racing, trying to make sense of what he was asking. Who could want such a thing? Why? The whole situation felt off, like a scene straight from a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. "We can't do that," I said, my voice sounding more confident than I felt. "It's against hospital policy." For a moment, the man's expression darkened. I thought he might argue, plead, or try to persuade us, but then something shifted. He seemed to realize that we weren't going to budge. His eyes narrowed and his jaw clenched, the muscles in his face twitching slightly, like he was holding back something dangerous. He didn't say another word. Instead, he just stared at us, his gaze cold and unsettling, sending an icy shiver down my back. Then, without a word, he turned and walked away. His footsteps echoed down the hallway, each step amplifying the unease in the air. The other orderly and I sat in stunned silence, the gravity of what had just happened slowly sinking in. My heart was pounding. I couldn't shake the feeling that we had narrowly avoided something terrible, something dark. "We should tell security," I said, breaking the silence. The other orderly nodded, his face pale. We quickly made our way upstairs to the security office, the hospital feeling even more ominous as we walked through the empty halls. The shadows stretched unnaturally long, as if they were reaching out to us, pulling us into the unknown. Every flicker of light seemed to add to the growing sense of dread. When we reached the security office, we found the guard on duty and explained what had happened. As soon as we described the man's request, the guard's expression changed. His eyes narrowed, his body stiffening with recognition. "Did he say anything about wanting to be alone in the morgue?" the guard asked, his voice tight with tension. "Yes," I replied, the unease in my stomach deepening. The guard let out a heavy sigh, his face darkening. "He's tried this before. We had a few run-ins with him over the past couple of months. He always disappears before we can catch him, but we know he's up to something." The realization hit me, like a punch to the gut. The man had done this before? What could he possibly want with the bodies in the morgue? My mind raced, conjuring all kinds of disturbing possibilities, none of them comforting. The guard assured us they would increase their patrols and keep an eye out for the man, but the whole experience left me shaken to my core. As I made my way back to the basement office, I couldn't shake the feeling that we had come dangerously close to something dark and twisted. The hospital didn't feel like the same place anymore. It felt like a building full of secrets. Secrets that the walls whispered in the dead of night. For the rest of my shift, I couldn't stop thinking about the man, his pale face, his desperate eyes, the way he asked to be left alone with the dead. The memory played over and over in my mind like a broken record, each repetition feeding the growing unease that gnawed at me from the inside. Even when my shift ended and I went home, I couldn't escape the feeling. The unease lingered like a shadow, following me wherever I went. I never saw the man again, but the memory of that night stayed with me. Every time I walked past a morgue, I felt that same chill, the one that reminded me how close we had come to letting something monstrous slip through our fingers. In 2019, when I was 13 years old, my dad took me hunting in the Pine Barrens. We had been there before, but this time, everything felt different. The air was heavier, and the trees seemed to press in closer together, as if they were trying to trap us. The smell of damp leaves and pine needles filled the air, and the silence was so profound, I could hear the slightest rustle of leaves miles away. We arrived just before sunset, setting up near the edge of the forest. My dad always said the best time to hunt was at night, when the animals were more active. I wasn't scared. I had been hunting with my dad before, and I trusted him completely. But as the sun dipped below the horizon and darkness started to swallow the trees, an uneasy feeling crept over me. The shadows stretched longer, turning the forest into a maze of dark shapes. It felt as if something was watching us, waiting. We walked deeper into the woods, our boots crunching softly on the ground. My dad had his rifle, and I carried the smaller one he had given me for my birthday. I held it close to my chest, the cool metal comforting against my palms. The deeper we went, the thicker the trees grew, blocking out the moonlight. Soon, the only light came from our flashlights. We stopped occasionally to listen for any sign of movement. My dad, a skill tracker, would crouch down to inspect the ground, but that night, there was nothing, no rustling leaves, no snapping twigs. It was like the entire forest had gone still. After an hour of walking, I started to feel exhausted. My legs ached, and I longed to rest. My dad noticed and suggested we sit for a bit. We found a small clearing and sat on a fallen log. The forest was so quiet that I could hear my heartbeat pounding in my chest. My dad whispered something about waiting for the right moment, but I didn't hear him. My focus was entirely on the surrounding darkness. Suddenly, a sound cut through the stillness. It wasn't the usual rustling of leaves or the snap of a twig. It was a low, guttural growl, like something big was stalking us. My heart sped up, and I turned to look at my dad. He was staring straight ahead, his face pale. Slowly, he reached for his rifle, signaling me to do the same. The growl came again, closer this time, louder, more aggressive. It echoed through the trees, making the hair on the back of my neck stand up. I gripped my rifle tighter, my hand shaking. My dad stood up, his eyes scanning the trees. He didn't say a word, but I could see the fear in his eyes. Whatever was out there, it wasn't something we had ever encountered before. Then, from the shadows, a figure appeared. It was tall, much taller than any animal I had seen before. Its body was hunched over, its eyes glowing faintly in the dark. It had the shape of a wolf, but much larger, almost like it didn't belong in this world. The growling grew louder, more vicious. The creature's breath was visible in the cold night air, and its sharp teeth glinted in the faint light of our flashlights. My dad whispered for me to stay still. My legs felt like they were going to give out, but I didn't move. I was frozen in place as the creature slowly stepped closer. Its growl turned into a snarl, and its yellow eyes locked on us. My dad raised his rifle, aiming at the creature, but he didn't shoot. We both knew shooting wouldn't help us now. The creature circled us, its movements predatory, its eyes never leaving us for a second. The air was thick with tension. Time seemed to slow, each passing second stretching on forever. The forest was silent, the usual sounds of the woods drowned out by the creature's growls and the beating of my heart. It wasn't just a hunt anymore. It was a battle for survival. Shadows. Every time I thought it was gone, it would appear again, its glowing eyes haunting us in the dark. I could barely breathe, my chest tight with fear, each beat of my heart like a drum pounding in my ears. We were trapped, surrounded by the consuming darkness and that terrifying creature. The creature let out a bone-chilling howl, so loud that it felt like the trees themselves were shaking. My dad grabbed my arm, pulling me to my feet, and without thinking, I ran. I could hear my dad's heavy footsteps pounding behind me as the creature's growls echoed through the forest, growing louder with each passing moment. The trees blurred around us, branches tearing at my arms and face as we crashed through the underbrush. My lungs burned, and my legs felt like they were about to collapse. But I didn't stop. We couldn't stop. We ran deeper into the forest, not caring which direction we were going. All I knew was that I had to get away from that creature. But the further we ran, the more lost we became. The familiar trails that once guided us had disappeared. Now, all I saw was an endless maze of dark trees and shifting shadows. Every direction looked the same, like we were going in circles. After what felt like hours, we stopped to catch our breath. My heart pounded in my chest, my legs trembling from exhaustion. My dad leaned against a tree, sweat dripping down his face, his breath ragged. The growling had stopped, but the silence that followed was even more terrifying. We were still lost, and that creature was still out there, waiting. "We need to keep moving," my dad whispered, his voice tight with fear. I nodded, but I had no idea where to go. We were completely lost in the Pine Barrens, with nothing but trees surrounding us. And that creature, it was still out there, lurking in the shadows, watching us. We wandered through the forest for what seemed like hours, each step more uncertain than the last. Every crack of a twig, every rustle of leaves made me jump. Every shadow felt like the creature was creeping up behind us. My flashlight flickered, its beam growing weaker by the second. The thought of being stuck out here in complete darkness terrified me. Then, Just as I thought we would never find our way out, we stumbled upon a familiar path. It was narrow, overgrown, but I recognized it from earlier. My dad let out a sigh of relief, and we followed the path back toward the truck. When we finally reached it, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. I climbed into the passenger seat, my hands still shaking. My dad started the engine, and we drove away, the dark trees of the Pine Barrens fading into the distance. We didn't speak during the ride home. The encounter with that creature was something neither of us could explain, and neither of us wanted to think about it anymore. But as I looked out the window, I couldn't shake the feeling that we weren't alone in the forest that night. We had made it out unharmed, but I knew one thing for sure. I would never go hunting in the Pine Barrens again. I've been working the night shift at this gas station for about a year now. The place sits on the edge of town, far enough away that we don't get much traffic during the late hours. It's a quiet job most of the time. I sit behind the counter, ring up the occasional customer, and watch the clock slowly crawl toward morning. The night this all happened was no different from the others. It was around 2:30 a.m., and I was getting ready for the end of my shift. The store was empty, just as it usually is at this time. The lights outside cast long shadows across the parking lot, and the only sound was a faint hum of the air conditioning inside the store. I had just finished counting the cash from the register, making sure everything was in order. My manager always told me to be careful, especially at night. You never know who might come through that door, she'd say. I didn't think much of it then. I thought I had everything under control. I had just finished counting the last of the bills when suddenly the front door slammed open. The sound was so loud, it nearly made me jump out of my seat. Before I could even process what was happening, a man stormed inside. He looked rough, dirty clothes, wild eyes, and he smelled like he hadn't showered in days. He didn't say a word. His eyes were fixed on the cash I was holding in my hand, and I froze for a moment. Everything seemed to slow down. I knew I should do something, anything, but I couldn't move. Then, without warning, he lunged at me, grabbing the cash from my hands. It all happened so fast. 1 second, I had the money. The next it was gone, and the man was already halfway to the door. That's when my instincts finally kicked in. I didn't know what came over me, but I wasn't going to let him get away with it. I bolted from behind the counter, yelling at him to stop. The adrenaline pumping through my veins drowned out any fear I might have felt. The man stumbled as he reached the parking lot, his movements unsteady. Drugs, probably. I could see the money sticking out of his jacket pocket as he tried to make his escape. "Stop right there," I shouted. He turned around, panic in his eyes, and tried to run faster, but his body wasn't cooperating. I closed the gap between us. Without thinking, I grabbed him by the arm. He struggled, trying to shake me off, but I held on tight. We wrestled for a moment before he broke free and started running again, but he wasn't getting far. My heart was racing, but I wasn't about to give up. I fumbled for my phone and dialed 911, my hand shaking as I explained the situation to the operator. I told them where I was, describing the man and what had just happened. They told me officers were on their way. I kept following him, keeping a safe distance. I didn't want to corner him. Who knows what a desperate man might do? He didn't seem to notice I was still trailing him. He was too focused on running, but it was clear his pace was slowing, and he kept looking over his shoulder. After what felt like hours, though it was probably only a few minutes, I heard the distant sound of police sirens. The man heard it too. He stopped dead in his tracks, his whole body tensing up. I stayed back, not wanting to spook him any further. Within moments, the police cars pulled into the lot, their lights flashing. 2 officers got out, guns drawn, and ordered the man to get on the ground. He hesitated for a moment, but he knew it was over. Slowly, he dropped to his knees and put his hands behind his head. The officers moved in, cuffing him and pulling him to his feet. One of them came over to me, asking for details. I explained everything, still trying to catch my breath. My hands were trembling, but I tried to stay calm as I recounted what had happened. The officers searched the man and found the cash still stuffed in his jacket. One of the officers told me the man was homeless, likely on drugs, which explained his erratic behavior. He had probably been desperate, looking for anything he could get his hands on. I watched as they led him to the back of the squad car, his head hanging low. A part of me felt sorry for him, living on the streets, addicted to something that was ruining his life. But at the same time, I was relieved that the whole ordeal was over. We wandered through the forest for what seemed like hours, each step more uncertain than the last. Every crack of a twig, every rustle of leaves made me jump. Every shadow felt like the creature was creeping up behind us. My flashlight flickered, its beam growing weaker by the second. The thought of being stuck out here in complete darkness terrified me. Then, just as I thought we would never find our way out, we stumbled upon a familiar path. It was narrow, overgrown, but I recognized it from earlier. My dad let out a sigh of relief, and we followed the path back toward the truck. When we finally reached it, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. I climbed into the passenger seat, my hands still shaking. My dad started the engine, and we drove away, the dark trees of the Pine Barrens fading into the distance. We didn't speak during the ride home. The encounter with that creature was something neither of us could explain, and neither of us wanted to think about it anymore. But as I looked out the window, I couldn't shake the feeling that we weren't alone in the forest that night. We had made out unharmed, but I knew one thing for sure. I would never go hunting in the Pine Barrens again. I've been working the night shift at this gas station for about a year now. The place sits on the edge of town, far enough away that we don't get much traffic during the late hours. It's a quiet job most of the time. I sit behind the counter, ring up the occasional customer, and watch the clock slowly crawl toward morning. The night this all happened was no different from the others. It was around 2:30 a.m., and I was getting ready for the end of my shift. The store was empty, just as it usually is at this time. The lights outside cast long shadows across the parking lot, and the only sound was the faint hum of the air conditioning inside the store. I had just finished counting the cash from the register, making sure everything was in order. My manager always told me be careful, especially at night. You never know who might come through that door, she'd say. I didn't think much of it then. I thought I had everything under control. I had just finished counting the last of the bills when suddenly the front door slammed open. The sound was so loud, it nearly made me jump out of my seat. Before I could even process what was happening, a man stormed inside. He looked rough, dirty clothes, wild eyes, and he smelled like he hadn't showered in days. He didn't say a word. His eyes were fixed on the cash I was holding in my hand, and I froze for a moment. Everything seemed to slow down. I knew I should do something, anything, but I couldn't move. Then, without warning, he lunged at me, grabbing the cash from my hands. It all happened so fast. 1 second, I had the money. The next it was gone, and the man was already halfway to the door. That's when my instincts finally kicked in. I didn't know what came over me, but I wasn't going to let him get away with it. I bolted from behind the counter, yelling at him to stop. The adrenaline pumping through my veins drowned out any fear I might have felt. The man stumbled as he reached the parking lot, his movements unsteady. Drugs, probably. I could see the money sticking out of his jacket pocket as he tried to make his escape. "Stop right there," I shouted. He turned around, panic in his eyes, and tried to run faster, but his body wasn't cooperating. I closed the gap between us. Without thinking, I grabbed him by the arm. He struggled, trying to shake me off, but I held on tight. We wrestled for a moment before he broke free and started running again, but he wasn't getting far. My heart was racing, but I wasn't about to give up. I fumbled for my phone and dialed 911, my hands shaking as I explained the situation to the operator. I told them where I was, describing the man and what had just happened. They told me officers were on their way. I kept following him, keeping a safe distance. I didn't want to corner him. Who knows what a desperate man might do? He didn't seem to notice I was still trailing him. He was too focused on running, but it was clear his pace was slowing, and he kept looking over his shoulder. After what felt like hours, though it was probably only a few minutes, I heard the distant sound of police sirens. The man heard it too. He stopped dead in his tracks, his whole body tensing up. I stayed back, not want to spook him any further. Within moments, the police cars pulled into the lot, their lights flashing. 2 officers got out, guns drawn, and ordered the man to get on the ground. He hesitated for a moment, but he knew it was over. Slowly, he dropped to his knees and put his hands behind his head. The officers moved in, cuffing him and pulling him to his feet. One of them came over to me, asking for details. I explained everything, still trying to catch my breath. My hands were trembling, but I tried to stay calm as I recounted what had happened. The officer searched the man and found the cash still stuffed in his jacket. One of the officers told me the man was homeless, likely on drugs, which explained his erratic behavior. He had probably been desperate, looking for anything he could get his hands on. I watched as they led him to the back of the squad car, his head hanging low. A part of me felt sorry for him, living on the streets, addicted to something that was ruining his life. But at the same time, I was relieved that the whole ordeal was over. The police thanked me for my quick response, telling me that I did the right thing by calling them. They mentioned that chasing the man wasn't the safest option, but they understood why I did it. I nodded, still shaken by the whole thing, the adrenaline coursing through my veins. After the police left, I went back inside the gas station. The place felt different now, like the walls themselves held a memory of what had just happened. What had started as just another quiet night on the job had turned into something I would never forget. I sat behind the counter, trying to calm my nerves. My hands still felt shaky, and I rubbed them against my legs, hoping to steady myself. The clock ticked slowly, each minute dragging on as if the world was in slow motion. My shift was almost over, but I wasn't counting the minutes like I usually did. I just sat there, staring at the front door, half expecting someone else to burst through it at any moment. The rest of the night passed uneventfully, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I had come so close to something much worse. When my shift finally ended, I grabbed my things and locked the doors behind me. The night air hit me like a wall of heat as I walked to my car. I couldn't help but think about the man. Life had beaten him down, and in his desperation, he made a choice that landed him in the back of a police car. I wondered what his story was, what had driven him to this point. But as I drove home, the weight of it all settled in, and I realized something. I was lucky. Things could have gone a lot worse that night. I was lucky to be going home. The road stretched out before us, dark and winding as we drove through forest. It was supposed to be a weekend of fun, just me, Devin, and our friends Bethany and Seth, heading out for a camping trip. The college semester had been brutal, and we all needed a break. The thought of sleeping under the stars, roasting marshmallows, and telling ghost stories by the fire made us all excited, carefree. But something about that night felt different. The trees seemed to loom closer to the road, their branches reaching out like twisted fingers. The moonlight barely pierced through the thick canopy above, casting strange, distorted shadows that danced across the pavement. I tried to shake off the unease that settled in the pit of my stomach, telling myself it was just the excitement of the trip. We were laughing, the radio playing our favorite songs, when suddenly a sharp turn came out of nowhere. Devin, who was driving, tried to swerve, but the car skidded on the wet road. The world spun around us as the tires screeched. Everything seemed to move in slow motion, my heart pounding in my chest, a cold sweat breaking out as the car went off the road and crashed into the trees. I heard Bethany scream, and then everything went black. When I opened my eyes, we were all standing outside the car. It was crumpled against a tree, the front smashed in, steam rising from the engine. I felt strange, like everything was muffled and distant. Bethany stood next to me, her face pale, eyes wide with fear. Seth was on the other side, staring at the wreckage, frozen in shock. "Is everyone okay?" I asked, my voice sounding oddly flat, detached, as if I wasn't really there. Bethany nodded slowly, but she didn't look at me. She just stared at the car, her lips trembling. Seth remained silent, his eyes fixed on the wreckage. I turned to look at what had caught his attention, and that's when my heart dropped into my stomach. Inside the car, still strapped into our seats, were our bodies. I blinked, unable to process what I was seeing. There I was, slumped over in the passenger seat, a trickle of blood running down my forehead. Devin was still gripping the steering wheel, his face twisted in pain, frozen in time. Bethany and Seth were in the back, their faces ashen, their eyes wide and lifeless. We're outside the car, Bethany whispered, her voice trembling with fear, finally looking at me. Her eyes were wide with terror. But we're still in there. I didn't know what to think. It felt like a nightmare, but everything was so vivid, so real. I reached out to touch the car, but my hand passed right through the metal. Panic started to build in my chest. Are we dead? Seth finally spoke, his voice trembling with dread. Are we dead? I didn't want to answer. The thought was too horrifying, too impossible. But what else could explain what was happening? We were standing here, outside our bodies, unable to touch anything, unable to feel anything. The forest around us seemed to grow darker with every passing second. The trees close in, their twisted shapes barely visible in the darkness. The air thickened with something I couldn't describe. It felt like we were being watched, like something was lurking in the shadows, waiting for us. I tried to move, to walk away from the car, but my feet felt heavy, as if something was pulling me back. We have to get out of here, I said, trying to sound brave, but my voice cracked. Maybe there's a way to fix this. But where could we go? We were in the middle of the woods, far from any town or help. The only thing that seemed real was the car and the broken bodies inside. Time passed in a blur. I don't know how long we stood there, staring at ourselves trapped in that sinking vehicle. The night seemed endless, and the darkness pressed in from all sides. Every sound in the forest, every rustle of leaves or snap of a branch made my heart race. It felt like the trees themselves were whispering, mocking us, telling us that we didn't belong in this world anymore. We were trapped, caught between two worlds with no way out. At some point, I started to feel dizzy, like I was being pulled into a deep, dark hole. My vision blurred, and the sounds around me faded. I could hear Bethany crying, could see Seth's terrified face, but everything seemed far away, like it was happening to someone else. Then everything went black again. When I opened my eyes, I was in a hospital bed. The bright lights above me stung my eyes, and the beeping of machines filled the room. I turned my head slowly, feeling groggy, like I was waking up from a long, terrible dream. Devin was in the bed next to me, his eyes half open, looking confused. I could see Bethany and Seth in the room as well, all of us hooked up to monitors, bandages covering our wounds. We're alive, I whispered, not quite believing it. A nurse came into the room, checking our vitals, smiling warmly. You all had a nasty accident, but you're going to be okay, she said, her voice calm and reassuring. You've been unconscious for a couple of days, but you're out of danger now. I could hardly process her words. My mind was still reeling from what we had experienced. I looked at Bethany, who was staring back at me with wide, haunted eyes. Seth was silent, his face pale, but there was relief in his expression. It felt so real. The crash, our bodies trapped in that sinking car, the fear that we were ghosts. But now, lying in this hospital bed, I wasn't sure what to believe. Had it all been a dream? Some kind of shared nightmare brought on by the trauma of the crash? As the nurse continued to check on us, I felt a shiver run down my spine. It didn't feel like a nightmare, not entirely. The memory of that dark forest, the sinking feeling of being trapped outside my own body, lingered in my mind, too vivid to ignore. But as I looked at my friends, safe and alive, I tried to push the thoughts away. We were okay. We had survived. The nightmare was over. After a long, exhausting shift as a pizza delivery driver during a heat wave, all I wanted was to finish my last delivery and head home. My shirt was sticking to my back, my hair damp with sweat, and my legs felt like they could give out at any moment. The sun had long set, but the heat still lingered, wrapping around me like a suffocating blanket. I had one last delivery to make, just a quick drop-off, and then I could escape the oppressive heat. The road stretched ahead, quiet, almost too quiet. The streets were deserted, and the only sound was the hum of the air conditioning in my car. I had hoped to end the night uneventfully, but as I turned the corner, I saw something strange. A shadow moved across the road, just ahead of me. It was too fast, too unnatural. What was that? I stopped the car, my heart racing. I didn't know what I'd seen, but I felt a chill sweep through me. I grabbed the pizza bag, trying to shake off the unease. Whatever it was, it didn't matter. I had a job to finish. But the fear that crept up my spine wouldn't let me go. It followed me as I made my delivery, every step feeling heavier than the last. The heat was thick and oppressive, like a blanket you couldn't kick off. My throat was dry, and my mouth tasted like cardboard after hours without water. But the worst part, I desperately needed to use the bathroom. I checked the address one more time as I pulled up to the house. The place was dark, no lights inside or outside, and it looked like it hadn't been lived in for years. Windows dirty, paint peeling, and the front lawn overgrown. The kind of place you could tell had been abandoned, or at least forgotten by time. I parked my car, grabbed a pizza box, and hoped this would be a quick one, but something about the house made me uneasy. It felt abandoned, like a place left to rot by the world. Shadows seemed to linger in the corners, as if they had a life of their own. The air was still eerily quiet, with no crickets chirping or distant traffic, not even the rustle of leaves in the breeze. I walked up to the front door, and the silence was deafening. I rang the doorbell, my hand trembling slightly. No answer. I rang again, waiting, feeling the sweat drip down my neck. Still nothing. I pulled out my phone and dialed the number on the order. A few rings later, a woman's voice answered, breathless and apologetic. "I'm so sorry," she said. "I'm on my way. Please just wait a few minutes." Her voice was shaky, like she was trying to hide something or someone. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, but I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. "Okay," I said, forcing my voice to stay calm. "I'll wait." But the need to relieve myself was growing unbearable. I glanced around, hoping to see something, anything, that would make this place feel less creepy. A neighbor walking their dog, even a stray cat, anything that would break the unnerving isolation. But the street was empty. It was just me, standing in front of this old, eerie house. I couldn't wait any longer. There was a large bush near the front of the house, thick with leaves. It was dark enough to give me some privacy, so I walked over, glancing around one last time. When I unzipped my pants, relief washed over me. The tension in my body finally eased. But then something moved, a rustle in the bushes right in front of me. My heart skipped a beat and I stumbled back, nearly falling over, as I zipped up my pants in a panic. In the dim light, I saw a figure crouched low in the bush, their face hidden in the shadows. My mind couldn't process what was happening. I had just peed on a man. The man suddenly bolted out of the bush, sprinting away before I could even react. He didn't look back, just ran like his life depended on it, disappearing into the darkness of the night. I stood frozen, my heart hammering in my chest. My mind raced with 1,000 questions. Who was he? What was he doing hiding in that bush? Why did he run? I looked down and saw something glinting in the faint light, a bag half hidden in the leaves. My hand shook as I reached down and pulled it out. It was a small, worn backpack. I opened it and my stomach dropped. Inside was a roll of duct tape, a knife with a serrated edge, and a length of rope. My breath caught in my throat. This wasn't some ordinary bag. This was something a person would carry if they had bad intentions. I stumbled back, my mind reeling. This man, he wasn't just a vagrant or a thief. He was planning something terrible, and I had interrupted him. Shaking, I grabbed my phone and dialed 911. The operator answered quickly, and I tried to keep my voice steady as I explained what had happened. I told him about the man, the bag, and the woman who was supposed to be coming to the house. They assured me help was on the way, but it felt like an eternity before I heard the distant wail of sirens. I paced the front yard, my eyes darting from shadow to shadow, expecting the man to return at any moment. Then I saw her. A woman was walking quickly down the street, looking over her shoulder every few seconds. She was the one who had called the customer. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with fear. When she saw me, she broke into a run. "You have to help me," she cried, her voice trembling as she reached me. "He's after me. My ex. He's dangerous." I didn't need to be told twice. I grabbed her arm and pulled her toward my car. "Get in," I said, trying to sound calm, even though my heart was racing. We'll wait for the police here." She nodded, tears streaming down her face as she climbed into the passenger seat. I locked the doors, my eyes scanning the dark street, waiting for any sign of movement. Minutes felt like hours, but finally, the flashing lights of police cars filled the street. Officers poured out, and I waved them over, explaining everything as quickly as I could. They moved swiftly, searching the area, but the man was long gone. The only thing left behind was the bag I had found. The woman was safe, and they took her statement, reassuring her that they would do everything they could to find her ex. I watched as she was led to one of the police cars, her face a mix of relief and lingering fear. As for me, I drove home that night. The image of that man in the bushes burned into my mind. I couldn't stop thinking about what could have happened if I hadn't been there, if I hadn't needed to relieve myself at that exact moment. It wasn't just luck. Deep down, I knew I had been meant to be there. The thought of how close that woman came to something terrible left me deeply shaken. I'll never forget that night. The way the shadows seemed to move, the oppressive heat pressing down on me, and the feeling of cold fear creeping up my spine. A few years ago, my best friend Kevin and I made a plan to explore an old abandoned house on the edge of town. We had heard many stories about it being haunted, but we didn't believe them. We thought it would be fun, something thrilling to do on a boring weekend. Little did we know that decision would change how we saw things forever. The house was on a hill, far from any other buildings. It looked ancient, with cracked walls and broken windows. The roof had caved in at some spots, and vines covered most of the house, making it look like nature was swallowing it whole. As we approached, I felt an uneasy feeling stir in my chest. Kevin, always the brave one, walked ahead confidently. "We'll just go in, take a look around, and leave," Kevin said, trying to sound calm. I nodded, though a strange sense of dread was creeping up on me. The air around the house felt heavier and colder, like something was wrong. I shook off the feeling and followed Kevin to the broken gate. The front door was hanging off its hinges, creaking as we pushed it open. Inside, the house was dark, the air thick with the smell of dust and decay. The floor was covered in dirt, and old furniture lay scattered, broken and forgotten. The silence inside was suffocating, broken only by the faint sounds of the wind blowing through the cracks in the walls. Kevin started walking around, inspecting the old furniture and peeling wallpaper. I stayed close behind him, my eyes scanning every corner of the room. Something didn't feel right. I couldn't put my finger on it, but the air seemed charged, as though we were being watched. As we moved deeper into the house, the feeling intensified. Every creak of the floorboards, every whisper of the wind, made me jump. The house was alive, but not in the way you'd expect. It felt like the walls were closing in, like the house didn't want us there. Suddenly, a loud noise came from upstairs, a door slamming shut. My heart skipped a beat and I froze. Kevin, too, looked up, his confident demeanor faltering for a moment. "Did you hear that?" I whispered. Kevin didn't answer. He just motioned for me to stay close. We slowly made our way up the stairs, the boards groaning under our feet with every step. The house seemed to be watching us, waiting, and then we saw it. The shadow. It moved quickly across the hallway, just out of our reach. We weren't alone. The feeling of being watched grew stronger. My heart pounded in my chest, and I kept glancing over my shoulder, half expecting to see something lurking in the shadows. Kevin, on the other hand, was still acting like nothing was wrong, his casual confidence irritatingly unshaken. We reached a narrow staircase that led up to the second floor, and Kevin turned to me with a grin. "Let's check upstairs," he said. I hesitated. "Maybe we should just look around down here," I suggested, trying to keep my voice steady. But Kevin was already climbing the stairs, the old wood creaking under his weight. I sighed and followed him, gripping the railing tightly. The second floor was even darker than the first. The windows were either boarded up or so dirty they let in almost no light. As we walked down the hallway, the temperature dropped and a foul, decaying smell hung in the air. I wanted to tell Kevin that we should leave, but before I could say anything, we heard it. A low, deep growl echoed through the hallway, sending a chill down my spine. Kevin froze, and I felt my blood turn to ice. The sound wasn't an animal growl. It was something much more sinister. "We need to leave," I whispered, my voice shaking. Kevin, stubborn as ever, started walking toward the door at the end of the hall. "It's probably just the wind or something," he said, though I could hear the uncertainty in his voice. He reached for the door, and as his hand touched the handle, the growling grew louder, more menacing. My heart raced, and every instinct in me screamed to run. But my feet felt glued to the floor, as if something invisible was holding me in place. Kevin slowly pushed the door open, and what we saw inside made my stomach churn. The room was dark, but in the corner we could see a shadow, a figure that wasn't quite human. It was hunched over, its eyes glowing faintly in the darkness. The growling stopped, and for a moment, there was complete silence. Then the figure spoke, its voice rasping and harsh. "Leave or never leave again." The words hung in the air like a curse, thick with malice. "Kevin," and I didn't wait to see what would happen next. Without a second thought, we turned and bolted down the hallway. The house seemed to come alive around us. The walls groaned. The floor creaked under our frantic footsteps, as if something was chasing us. We stumbled down the stairs, barely keeping our balance, and sprinted for the front door. The air around us felt thick, like it was trying to pull us back. But we didn't stop. We ran out of the house, through the broken gate, and didn't look back until we were far enough away to catch our breath. When we finally stopped, both of us were gasping for air, our hearts pounding in our chests. We stood there in the empty field, staring at the house in the distance. It looked the same as before, quiet, still, and untouched. But we knew better now. We never talked about that day again, but the memory of it stayed with me, haunting my every thought. I couldn't shake the feeling that we had escaped something dangerous, something that didn't want us there. The words of the figure echoed in my mind. "Leave or never leave again." To this day, I don't know what we encountered in that house. But one thing was certain. We had come too close to something beyond our understanding. Something dark and twisted lived in that house, and it made sure we knew it. From that day on, I avoided that hill. I stayed far away from that house. Whatever was in there, I didn't want to find out. We were lucky to escape, but not everyone might be as fortunate. And I never forgot the warning. Leave or never leave again. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to subscribe to our channel for more spine-chilling true stories that will keep you up at night. Don't forget to hit the bell icon so you never miss an eerie tale. Stay safe, and remember, some places are better left unexplored.